Someone asked me, if the soul, the true self, has no desires and is the end in itself, how does one go about managing commitments, goals, personal desires for betterment, etc.? I think this is a good question. It's a question that will probably occur to most philosophically minded spiritual seekers at some point. Another way of putting it might be, why would a Buddha even get out of bed in the morning? After all, if he has no desire, why do anything at all? Why even get up off the couch? It sounds silly to phrase it this way, but it's a serious question, and it deserves a serious answer. Different answers have been given. I'll offer the answer that seems the most reasonable to me, but I won't claim that this is the one true final answer, obviously. I think the key is found in the way the question starts. If the soul, the true self. In many systems, the soul is not considered to be the true self. Arguably, the true self isn't even really the true self. Gnostics and even mainstream Christian theologians make a distinction between the soul and the spirit. In the hypostasis of the archons, it says that the archons have souls, but not spirits. Humans are said to have both a soul and a spirit. Gnosticism and Pythagoreanism, and pretty much all religious systems that draw from astrotheology, present the idea that as the soul enters into a new incarnation, it passes through the planetary spheres and is given characteristics by the different planetary rulers. This is basically why astrologers believe that your personality is influenced by the positions of the planets at the time of your birth. And in the Pistis Sophia and other works that deal with the process of the soul's ascent, there seems to be a process of shedding the layers of clothing, so to speak, that have been put on the soul in the course of its descent. Whether or not you believe in astrology, obviously we each have a personality. And most systems that I'm familiar with don't consider the personality to be an eternal and unchanging part of the immortal soul or spirit. The personality is something that's sort of put on and worn, much like the physical body. This is something to note because, of course, when the Buddha became enlightened, his body didn't suddenly dissolve. And my view is that just like an enlightened person still has their body, they still have their personality or persona, and even their ego. The difference is that they're no longer identified with their egoic nature, but with their higher spiritual nature. The ego is still there. The persona or personality is still there. The body is still there, but it's no longer the center of your being. People used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe. When it was accepted that the solar system is heliocentric rather than geocentric, the Earth didn't dissolve, and really nothing changed. The true center has been discovered, that's all. So I disagree with the idea of dissolving the ego. I think it's better to talk about dissolving the identification with the ego. There's no need to destroy your body. Take care of your body. Treat it like a temple. But don't worship the temple. Don't be governed by carnal desires and impulses. Let your actions be directed according to the higher principle. In the same way, there's no need to get rid of the ego or the persona. These are parts of the psyche. But like the body, these parts of the psyche, along with the shadow and the anima or animus, should be integrated and brought into alignment with the true self and the true will. I think this is the essence of individuation. To know yourself, or to become identified with your true self, is to become psychically whole. You're no longer a fragmented self with warring parts. And we can apply this principle socially or politically as well, because reality is fractal. There's no need to dissolve national borders or deny racial and ethnic differences. These are parts of a greater whole. But it isn't necessary to destroy the parts. If you destroy the parts, you destroy the whole. If you truly dissolved the ego, If the ego was truly destroyed, wholeness would be impossible. You could never become enlightened. You can never build a community by destroying the individuals. A healthy community is one that strengthens the individual. And integrating into a community is important to the health of the individual. When I talk about community, I mean a community of individuals. A community is really a complex web of social and economic relationships and interactions between individuals. A community is not the same as a collective. A community integrates the individual. A collective dissolves the individual. The New World Order of the globalist is collectivist. It seeks to dissolve national borders and destroy racial identity. And of course, it also seeks to destroy individual identity, which is why they push a corrupt form of pseudo-spirituality through the New Age movement, which promotes dissolving the ego as the goal. It's a perversion of true spirituality. The New Age movement, feminism, multiculturalism, socialism, postmodernism, and so on are all very much connected. The New World Order of the true Illuminati, or of the truly enlightened, is not collectivist or globalist. It's individualist and nationalist. And because of the way you've been conditioned, it may be difficult for you to reconcile individualism and nationalism. And I've dealt with this question in another video. But there's nothing about having a strong individual identity that prevents you from integrating into your community. In fact, I would argue that it's necessary to develop a strong individual identity before you can truly integrate into a community. Those who lack individual identity will form collectives rather than communities. For them, community is impossible because they lack individual identity. So collective identity takes the place of individual identity for them. I see this in the identity politics of the left especially, but I see the danger in the alt-right as well. There's definitely a danger that a nationalist movement can become collectivist in nature. And the main reason I'm cautious of the alt-right, although I share some common views with many on the alt-right, is because of the fascist undercurrent. There's definitely a libertarian undercurrent as well, though. In my view, the future of the alt-right depends on which current prevails. I absolutely support the alt-right to the extent that it represents resistance to globalism and cultural Marxism. And I think it has the potential to be a positive social and political movement. But I'm aware of the danger of collectivism as well. And I think it's a fine line. There's nothing wrong with a black person or a white person or an Asian person having a healthy sense of racial identity. I think it's perfectly natural and good for individuals who share a common biological, geographical, cultural, and linguistic heritage to form communities together. This is how I define a nation. And in this sense, I consider nationalism to be natural and good. But racial or national identity can become another false self, just as the ego can. Knowing your true self is about finding your center and acting from your center. Your true self, in the esoteric view, is immortal and immaterial. When you incarnated, you took on certain characteristics in sort of the same way you put on clothes. Your clothes aren't you, and you realize this. But this doesn't mean that you strip and run naked through the street. You've put on a personality. You've put on a body. And as we learn more about genetics, we discover that the personality and the body are connected. And it's easy to look at different dog breeds and see that different breeds have different characteristics. Basset hounds not only share certain identifiable physical traits, but share certain personality or character traits as well. Basset hounds are not the same as golden retrievers, or border collies, or St. Bernards, or Rottweilers. Of course, they're the same species. They're all dogs. They can interbreed and have mixed-breed puppies. And only a person who is brainwashed by multiculturalism and political correctness will deny the obvious truth that the different human races also share certain characteristic personality traits, in addition to having different genetic or biological traits, even though it's also true that we're all human, and therefore share certain traits as members of the same species. And you could go even further and say that humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas are all primates. And of course, primates and dogs and cats are all mammals. And mammals and reptiles and fish are all animals. And animals and plants are both living organisms. And according to the esoteric view, even minerals and inorganic matter are ultimately a part of the same chain of being. They're all part of the all which emanates from the one. And we might conceive of this as spheres within spheres, or as smaller spheres revolving around larger spheres. And a harmony arises from the interplay. This is the music of the spheres. But finding the root note of a scale doesn't require us to destroy the perfect fifth. The harmonious intervals that arise through the ratio of the other notes of the scale and the root note are part of the essential nature of the root note itself. And in the same way, identification with the true self is not at odds with what we might call the accidental identity. I mean accidental in something like the Aristotelian sense of the word. Your egoic identity, your personality, your national or racial identity, and other aspects of your temporal and mortal self can all be thought of as accidental. But that doesn't make them trivial or arbitrary. There is a reason why you are a human instead of a lower animal or a plant or mineral. And according to the esoteric view, you were once a lower animal. You were once a plant. You were once a mineral. And eventually, you will transcend the human level too, just as you've evolved beyond the animal, plant, and mineral levels. But you shouldn't look down on animals, plants, and minerals, or harm them unnecessarily. They're very much a part of your true self. They all represent a stage in the evolution of the big idea, or the divine self-concept, which arises within the universal mind in order that it might know itself. And every stage in this cosmic evolutionary process is necessary, in the same way that every step in the solution of a math problem is necessary in order to arrive at the solution. And so, although the clothes don't make the man, a man who is guided by intention dresses himself in a certain way for a purpose. A man who works with hazardous materials will put on a hazmat suit. A construction worker will put on work boots and a safety helmet. A businessman will put on a business suit. There's a relationship between the clothes you wear and your purpose. What you wear is connected to what you're doing here. In the same way, I would suggest that your accidental identity, although it isn't your true identity, it isn't your true self, is an identity which your true self has put on for a purpose. And the clothes you wear in each incarnation, in each lifetime, are connected with your purpose or your karma. As I understand it, the ethical philosophy of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is essentially deontological. Arjuna is told that he must fight because it is his duty. It is his karma. Who your parents are, you might say, is merely an accident of birth. But they're your parents. And as your parents, they have a certain duty. Parents have a duty to their young children, and grown-up children have a duty to their elderly parents. You were born a member of a particular race, or as a citizen of a particular nation. This racial or national identity isn't a part of your essential spiritual nature, but it's part of your karma, and you have a certain duty. It isn't a matter of identification with the false self, it's simply a matter of accepting your karma, because this is in accordance with your true will. If you resist your karma, you're in rebellion against your true will. This is to disidentify with your true self. The question was, how does a person who has become identified with the true self go about managing commitments, goals, personal desires for betterment, etc.? But I hope you can see now how, according to the esoteric view, this is only natural. How could a person who knows himself do anything other than his true will? But Krishna tells Arjuna to act with detachment. He doesn't tell him not to act. Jesus says, "Be in the world, but not of the world." When Jesus says, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and render unto God that which is God's," we can understand this as referring to the Gnostic in the kingdom of the demiurge. Caesar is the demiurge. Your false self, according to Gnosticism, is the creation of the demiurge. Carnal and psychic man bears his image. When Jesus is asked whether it's lawful to pay taxes, he tells the querent to look at the coin and tell him whose image the coin bears. Of course, the coin bore the image of Caesar. This is why he said, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's." Your body and soul are of this world, and are subject to the law of this world, the law of karma. But your true self is of a spiritual nature. A man who identifies with the carnal or psychic nature is a slave to the law. He is a slave to his karma. He is a slave to the demiurge or the god of this world. And like a slave, he may be rewarded or punished depending on whether he pleases or displeases his master. And in a sense, it's his desire to be rewarded and his fear of being punished that keeps him enslaved. And the rewards offered by the god of this world are only the things of this world, such as worldly wealth and power or sensual pleasure. The punishments are only worldly punishments, such as poverty, social rejection, or physical pain and discomfort. An enlightened man, like Socrates or Jesus, isn't afraid of anything that the rulers of this world can inflict on his body, and so both willingly faced death. A man who identifies with the spiritual nature is not a slave to the law. He is free from the law. He is liberated from the wheel of karma. He's not a slave to the god of this world. And as a free man, he isn't controlled by threats and bribes. And his freedom is a result of his indifference to the rewards and punishments promised by those who wish to control him. And so Krishna tells Arjuna to do his duty. He tells him to act, but to act according to duty or karma, and not out of the desire for reward or some particular outcome. Zen masters teach essentially the same thing. Act without thought of victory or defeat. Act without attachment to the outcome. And so the enlightened man accepts his karma, but he isn't a slave to it. The false self has no choice. The false self is a slave to karma. The true self is free. The true self chose his karma. Why wouldn't he accept it? This is the life he chose. It's commonly said that you don't choose your parents. But didn't you? It's commonly said that you didn't choose to be born in the country you were born in. But is this true? Are all these accidents of birth really accidents? Or does everything ultimately happen according to the divine will, or according to your true will? So when I say, accept your karma, I'm simply saying, be who you've chosen to be, or fully embrace the role you've chosen to play, but don't forget who you really are. The world's a stage, and we all must play our part. You agreed to play this role. Don't back out now. The show is already started. Don't disappoint the audience or let your fellow cast members down. The Hindu sages described the universe as a cosmic play. And it's up to you how literally you want to take this, but I'm offering it as a useful mental frame. Who is the audience? The audience is God, or the all-seeing eye, so to speak. It's you. You're the audience. You're the playwright. You're all of the cast members. But the play loses all of its suspense if you know everything that's going to happen. So you hypnotized yourself and made yourself forget that you wrote it. But of course there won't be any play unless there are actors. But you're the one. You're all there is. So the one became the all. And it's hard to imagine one person playing every character in a live stage play, but it's easy to imagine that with a little camera magic and studio editing, one person could play every part in a movie. There are quite a few movies where the same actor plays several different roles. But of course, when they're playing one character, they really get into that character, and they imagine that the other characters are actually real people. They forget that they're the one playing all of them. And sometimes an actor gets so wrapped up in his role that he may go crazy. And this is something like the person who becomes too identified with his egoic self. Pythagoras used the analogy of a sporting event instead of a play, but the meaning is the same. He said that some people are like the players on a field. They're very caught up in the game. For them, it's very serious. It's very important to win. He compares other people to merchants, who are there to sell stuff to the fans. To put it in modern terms, these are the people who are selling hot dogs and t-shirts. For them, the game is just a game, but they see that they can make money off of it. They don't care if you're cheering for the Eagles or the Patriots. They'll sell you an Eagles jersey or a Patriots jersey. Whichever one you want is fine. If you want to buy a I'm with her t-shirt to support Hillary, that's fine. If you want to buy a Make America Great Again hat to support Trump, they've got those for sale too. And Pythagoras didn't have anything against merchants. He wasn't an anti-capitalist. His father was a merchant. He didn't have anything against athletes or politicians. One of his first students was a young athlete, and some of his later students were involved in politics. But he promoted a third way. He compared other people to the audience. And he thought that this class of people was the most like the philosopher. Be the observer. But I would suggest there's a fourth way, and it's the one I promote. And I don't think Pythagoras would disagree with me. Be an active observer. No one has a better view of the action than the players on the field or the actors on the stage. But the whole world is a stage. The whole world is an athletic field. The whole world is a marketplace. Everyone is a player. Everyone is a merchant. There's nowhere to go to just sit in the bleachers and watch passively as the drama unfolds. Unless you're on a one-man moon colony looking at the Earth through a telescope, you're involved. You're part of it. And your part in this is the part you chose to play. So play the part you were born to play. But be an observer. Remain detached. Act, but act from your center. Accept your role in the unfolding cosmic drama, but don't lose yourself in the character. Remember who you really are. But remembering who you are and being the observer doesn't mean you stop living. Socrates says that the unexamined life is not worth living. But I would like to add something to this. I would also like to say that the unlived life is not worth examining. You have to do both. Examine your life, but don't forget to live it. Practice being fully present and engaged, yet detached. This is the way of liberation. I'll end here. Peace.